Welcome back to the Public Relations Podcast. I hope you found that interview with Liz Queck to be absolutely fascinating. It's really interesting to hear from the inside. It's nice to talk to someone from internal comms. Right, it's time to do a comms conundrum for this week, where we have a look at a fictional scenario, to see what you would do in the situation. And this is a quirky one this week. I love to do ones which are just a bit more unusual because it helps you to get your creative juices flowing and thinking, what would I really do in this situation? So imagine this. You're sitting in a quite an odd room, actually, in this old grand house. And the office is draped in velvet, which immediately you're like, what? Where am I? Well, you have been employed by the National Magic Academy. So this is a generic name, but for a body which is representing the whole magic industry in your country. Now, if you're not into magic, bear with me, because this is all about PR. So this is just a scenario for you to practice on. As you're sitting in this room, you are surrounded by artifacts from decades of illusions. There's everything from guillotines and saws and dice and all kinds of weird things from the past. Now, the Academy's director leans into you when you're having a meeting, and they say, look, we've got a bit of a problem. People tend to think of magic as being old-fashioned and about cheap tricks for kids' parties or Vegas shows. But magic, to them, as they're talking to you, is an art. It's a tradition of wonder. It's about misdirection. It's about illusion. And it's been something that's been going on for centuries. And we need to get across the idea that this isn't just some kind of cheap trick for kids. This is something that should be respected, almost feared, and people should realize how integral it is to our society in the past and today. So they said, look, we want you to get across the message that magic is the timeless art of wonder, inspiring creativity across generations and impacting what's been going on in the world. So the challenge, of course, with this is most people are going to associate magic with entertainment, not art or cultural significance, as this person wants. And you've got this job now to try and shift public perception. So how do you weave magic into the public consciousness again? As always, there are just two options that you can pick from. And you have to pick from one, because there's always going to be better ways of doing things. But the thing about this is to challenge you. So here's option one. Do you partner with artists, writers, and maybe even a filmmaker for the Magic of Inspiration series? And this would be sort of public installations and performances showcasing how magic has influenced people's creative works. How it's influenced parties, how it's influenced writers, how it's influenced filmmakers. Talking about, like, there's movies, aren't there, where they've had magic in them and they've been integral, even when they're, like, committing crimes and stuff like that. So do you partner with a filmmaker to make the Magic of Inspiration video series about how that's happened? Or do you create an invisible history campaign with maybe a TV channel or something like that, revealing surprising moments where magic has influenced world events, culture and science across the centuries? Maybe you do some interactive museum exhibits with the National Museum, some live reenactments of magic which hasn't been done for centuries, or you even demonstrate how sleight of hand and manipulation and misdirection was done in the courts of kings or queens over the centuries by doing a TV show, or even actually doing it as a live performance in a museum or something like that, adding some kind of historical element to it. So what would you do? Would you go for the Magic of Inspiration, whereby you make a series which is aimed at artists, writers, and talk about how they've been influenced by magic? Or do you do something which focuses on the history of magic and how it's influenced world events? Well, to me, I'm going to go for option two, because I think it just matches more with the goals of what you've been given as the brief. I think the first one is just a bit too boring. It's just been too done. Writers, artists, and filmmakers, how they've been influenced by it. Yes, you might get a few bits of traction off that. The Magic of Inspiration, it's got a certain ring to it, but I just don't think it's going to carry much weight. It's just going to be an also-ran piece like so many others. Whereas I think if you start to really talk about the history of how magic has influenced society, how it's influenced world events, how it's influenced culture, how it's influenced kings and queens and all that kind of thing, and you make a story around that and how your life today has been influenced not just by battles or by historical events, but has actually been influenced by magic, I think you've got a much more compelling story, because then people will start to question their own reality and how it has had an effect. So I would certainly lean towards option two. I would be taking advantage of that particular story, which we know is going to resonate deeply with people, and it's going to make them question our whole world when they see how misdirection and how, not just like magic tricks, but I mean, how misdirection, how people have used magical techniques to influence society over the centuries. So I would go for option 2 out of those two. What do you think, though? A bit of a quirky one for you this time. How would you approach it out of those two options? I always love to hear what your thoughts are, how you would perhaps approach it if you could go beyond those two options. You can always reach out to me on LinkedIn, Richard Midson, Midson. That's your comms conundrum for this week. I'll be back next week.